You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and happy Halloween, the spookiest of spookies to all Rise in Crime listeners on this eve of Halloween. And since it's right before Halloween, we need to do at least some spooky crimes today. So let's start out with this short, yet kind of creepy story out of Los Angeles. Here, I'll set the scene. It's mid-October of this year in the sun-baked hills of West Covina, California. That's a suburb east of Los Angeles, where the air smells like eucalyptus and currently the economy hints at quiet desperation. Joey Espinoza, who was just 44 years old, has died from heart failure just the week prior. Joey was, from what his family says, the kind of guy with a, quote, heart of gold. The uncle who energized family barbecues with his easy laugh and unwavering loyalty. Born and raised in the LA area, Joey worked in construction, kind of the hands-on job that built communities but probably wore down his body over time. His sudden death left a void. His aunt, Laura Lavario, described him as the nephew who always had your back. He was a quiet pillar in a sprawling Latino family rooted in Covina's tight-knit neighborhood. The Espinosas, like so many working-class families, turned to Forest Lawn, a sprawling upscale mortuary chain known for its manicured grounds, celebrity graves, and promises of dignified send-offs. The family shelled out nearly $20,000 for their memorial service, expecting solace amid the sadness they were feeling. As the family gathered in the chapel, Laura and her husband George and Joey's siblings, also some cousins, basically a room full of grieving kin, they started to approach the open casket. And there, dressed in Joey's finest suit, lay a stranger. This wasn't a misspelling on the funeral program. This wasn't the wrong colored flowers placed atop the casket. This was the wrong body entirely. And it went from bad to worse when Laura asked funeral home directors where Joey's body was. Laura told CBS Los Angeles that funeral home staff didn't have an answer for her. They didn't know where Joey was. The staff was flustered and unsure of where the mix-up had occurred, so they ushered the family into a side room, probably to ease tensions and let them express emotions that probably shouldn't be seen by the public. The funeral home staff allegedly then went and retrieved another body for the family to view. Guess what? It was the wrong body again. The gathered family didn't contain their emotions after that. Some of them accused funeral home staff of incompetency and malfeasance. Others wept with overwhelming sadness. Some just erupted in yelling, and that, I'm sure, came from frustration. And all while the emotions were spilling out everywhere, George Lavario, that's Laura's husband and Joey's uncle, all that heartache and now the chaos, it caused George to collapse on the floor. George had a massive heart attack right there in the funeral home. So George is a retired mechanic in his late 60s. He's got a salt and pepper mustache and kind of a gentle demeanor. All of that because he's worked with people's cars and, fixing engines in the Covina garage. He woke up 3 days later, hooked to machines in a hospital bed. And when George finally became well enough and spoke to reporters from his recovery room, he said the following: "She told me I collapsed," meaning Laura. And then he said, "I woke up 3 days later in the hospital on life support. It's the worst experience we've ever had." Now, Laura, a school administrator and the family's emotional anchor, she stayed by George's side, but her own grief was compounded by the fresh trauma. The Lavario Espinoza family isn't going to let this error go. They have since decided to file suit, not just for Joey's botched farewell, but also the invisible wounds that will last for years following the added trauma of George's collapse. So, speaking of Joey, What happened back at Forest Lawn after George was rushed to the hospital? Well, after an hour of frantic searching, staff found Joey's body. And those there for the service were able to eventually pay their respects. Administration at Forest Lawn says they have an excuse. They claim it was a scheduling error that caused the wrong body to be wheeled into Joey's service. So, you might be asking, how did they choose to make amends? How could they make this all right with the Lavario family? You're going to be disappointed here. Forest Lawn agreed to reduce the overall bill by 1%. That's a paltry $200. Joey's family's lawyer thinks that's, well, crap. He said the following: when you're spending that much money on a place like Forest Lawn, you would think they would do things properly. Now, the lawyer also challenged reporters to look up Forest Lawn's website. So I did that, and he was correct about what he was saying. The professional website does brag about the most spectacular scenery in Los Angeles that includes comprehensive planning and funeral services. I'm not sure if delivering the wrong body to the funeral service is qualifying as comprehensive services, but we'll leave that up to the courts to decide. And of course, we had to go looking. Has this happened before? Wrong body displayed at a funeral service? Yeah, it happened just last month in Camden, New Jersey, where a family is suing after their loved one's viewing featured the wrong deceased person dressed in the right clothes. Can you even imagine looking in the casket and saying, "That's Aunt Mildred's dress, but that's not Aunt Mildred"? And then at an NYC funeral home several weeks ago, they shipped the right deceased body, that of 96-year-old Queen's grandmother, but they shipped her to the wrong country. She was supposed to return to family in Ecuador, and instead she ended up in Guatemala. Again, a lawsuit is pending in that case. But I'm not done. We have sisters in Long Island who filed a $60 million claim against a funeral home that buried the wrong man in their family plot. Again, can you even imagine showing up to visit the eternal resting place of your grandmother and you realize they have buried a man next to her and she isn't his wife or any family relation? Now, I could keep going with these stories because there were more, but here's the bottom line. The funeral home industry has gone relatively unchecked for some time. I have covered cases here from Idaho and Colorado where bodies were left to just decay on shelves while funeral homes did not tend to their broken cremation ovens. Or, like the story near my hometown, the funeral home was giving that cremation remains that weren't even belonging to the family. It was somebody else's remains. All right, the U.S. funeral industry, well, it's valued at over $20 billion annually. It operates in a fragmented regulatory landscape that's kind of historically under-regulated at both federal and state levels. While the Federal Trade Commission's 1984 funeral rule mandates price transparency came about, well, that prohibits deceptive practices like requiring itemized quotes and allowing consumers to buy caskets elsewhere. You can even rent caskets. See, all of that's available, but the enforcement of it is weak, meaning you might show up and they'll talk you into something else because nobody's watching what they're saying to you. See, violators can often join a National Funeral Directors Association, so that's the NFDA. It's kind of a regulation that self-polices. It's got a funeral rule offenders program, which shields infractions from the public view, effectively letting the industry just regulate itself. Now, this has fostered a lack of competition, and large corporations like Service Corporation International, well, they control over 1,400 locations, 1,400 funeral homes. That's about 20% of the market. They go around and they buy up family-run funeral homes, and then they drive up the costs amid limited options in those cities. And then there's this, prepaid plans, a $15 billion market within the funeral home industry, but they carry high risks. Industry consolidation or lost paperwork can force families to pay twice for a service, with very little recourse beyond state insurance guarantees that kind of vary widely from state to state. Now, the hard part here is You are emotionally wrecked when you are making these decisions. And when pre-planning, those paying for the pre-planned services might not be that great at sharing information with their family members. Here's my advice. After losing my father when I was just 26, and then my mother in 2019, I learned a couple of things. Ask the tough questions ahead of time. Make plans when you aren't emotionally compromised. You can't control the funeral home industry, but you can control the decisions you make for yourself and those whom you love. Let me know if you have any experience with this or if you got taken advantage of by a funeral home. Drop it in the comments. And you know I like to mix it up around here. We cover some things that are so bloody and so gory and so horrific. In fact, it was a pretty heavy assault podcast last Monday. So I was like, let's take a little break. We've got crimes that don't have such violent details in them, but that they cause harm nevertheless. So let's cover those ones. And this crime deals with a man of power, getting paid off for using his power to enrich others. And by extension, enriching his life, and in this crime, also enriching his daughter's life. All right, Constantinos Diamantis, or Costa, as he goes by, was born into a Greek family living in Bristol, Connecticut in 1956. He was the son of Greek parents who held citizenship in Greece, and Costa grew up living a Greek life in Connecticut, eating authentic foods and hearing the stories of the old country. Costa was raised in a home where his parents taught him resilience and ambition. Basically, they were telling him, you can have what you work hard for. Costa did that. He worked diligently in school, earning a bachelor's by the age of 21 before attending the Franklin Pierce Law Center at the University of New Hampshire to get his Juris Doctorate by the age of 28. He had to work hard through school, holding down jobs and budgeting what little money he had to make a family function. See, Costa married Pauline Holinka, and together the two eventually had 5 children. They settled outside of Hartford, Connecticut, where Costa worked hard to create the luxuries that he felt his family deserved. A new pool, renovations to the home. And in his early years, Costa worked as an attorney. But he eventually scored a job with the Office of School Construction and Grants. That office is all under the Government Office of Policy and Management. Okay, as I was researching that, I got this feeling that you could just string together some words and call it a position at the state and federal government levels, and then the taxpayers would pay you without even having asked any questions about what do you even do for a job. Well, back to Costa. Eventually, after working there, he was appointed by Governor Ned Lamont as the Deputy Budget Director, where he wielded significant sway over the $1.7 billion statewide construction program. He was tasked with approving grants and contracts for renovations across the state. Costa was bragging that he would be a crusader against waste, slashing bloated projects, demanding transparency from contractors, and exposing what he referenced as the, quote, cartel of insiders that were supposedly fleecing taxpayers. Now, everything I just told you is very important to the rest of this story, so remember what his mission was. Now, with this attitude, he won the hearts of some in state government, but he also created enemies with others. And in 2020, federal investigators were tipped off that Costa's bulldog persona of protecting the taxpayers' dollars might not be all that genuine. Whistleblowers were contending that Costa was not reforming the system. Instead, he was exploiting it. Witnesses said in 2019, as Costa played hardball with contractors, working them to lower their bids on projects, he in turn started to solicit so-called fees. This in exchange for easing approvals and steering lucrative deals towards certain contractors. Kind of an I'll scratch your back and you scratch mine scenario. The first threads of deceit involved Acronym Masonry. That's a Middletown-based firm specializing in brickwork for school projects. Executives from that company, Sal Monarca and John Duffy, well, they testified at Costa's eventual trial that Costa pressured them relentlessly. Audits of their work were threatened. Payments were delayed, and Costa even dropped veiled hints about, quote, taking care of his needs. In hushed meetings that happened at his Windsor home and at a Hartford steakhouse called Capitol Grill, and even in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, these executives handed over envelopes stuffed with $50,000 in cash. Those envelopes filled with cash were basically bribes, and they happened between 2019 and 2021. And in turn, Costa awarded those executives high-dollar contracts. Texts and emails that were later seized by the FBI painted a quid pro quo situation, one where Costa allegedly promised to fast-track Acronom's bids on multi-million-dollar jobs in towns like Norwich and New Britain, including a $17 million envelope scheme where he skimmed kickbacks to himself. Now, one text shared in court read, "You scratch my back, I'll approve yours." Costa, who actually testified in his trial, said that was just tongue-in-cheek banter. Now, the scheme then took on a personal flavor when Costa felt he needed to help out his daughter Anastasia, who had taken out multiple student loans for her college education. Antoinetta Roy, she was the owner of Construction Advocacy Professionals. That's a firm advising on school builds. Well, Antoinetta recounted in court how Costa, quote, suggested that she hire Anastasia in 2020 for a $45 per hour job. Anastasia would assume an administrative role she wasn't even qualified for. Antoinetta Roy, fearing reprisals on her own contracts, complied, and paying Anastasia $20,000 over several months while Costa allegedly quashed competitors and funneled her more business. Witnesses at trial described Costa as a man who blurred lines ruthlessly, saying he would rant about, quote, fixing the government program by day, then he would pocket favors by night. Favors like cash and golf outings and meals, even directives from him to contractors where he would tell them to, quote, keep him happy in order to secure grants. Now, with these whistleblowers whistling, an internal OPM probe began. And when the questions started being asked, the contractors started sharing their complaints and their receipts because they had the text messages. They had the documents to prove the coercion. Governor Lamont, stunned by the betrayal of the man he had appointed, fired Costa in October of 2021. It took some time, but in July of 2024, federal charges were leveled against Costa. 22 felony counts of bribery, extortion, conspiracy, and false statements to investigators. Costa and his attorney tried to spin the whole narrative, saying that Costa was actually a hero that had been targeted by greedy contractors and overzealous prosecutors. But when he went to trial in early October of this year, the evidence was just too much. There were wiretapped conversations, damning financial statements, and a parade of witnesses who had tales to tell, especially the two I've already mentioned, Sal Monarca and John Duffy. See, those guys took plea deals for their bribery charges, and in turn, their sentences were promised to be lighter for testifying against Costa. Let me give you just one example. While securing one bid, Costa had in writing asked for a payment of $40,000 in cash in order for the contract to be awarded to a certain company. In the email exchange, Costa mentions how gracious he was being by only asking for $40,000. Now, Costa and these contractors, they spoke so often about exchanging of money that they even had code words for their bribery. When they would send money to Costa, the money was referred to as, quote, pints or, quote, birthday cards. Now, the texts at times got testy. There were threats by Costa that he would pull a contract if more money was not delivered to him. While on the witness stand, Costa pretty much admitted to directing contracts towards certain businesses, but he was adamant that his daughter earned her position with Antoinetta and that he had nothing to do with her pay or job security. It wasn't enough that Costa was asking to be rewarded on certain jobs. He was also negotiating with these businesses to put on a yearly salary as a consultant. Okay, so follow my track here. He's getting these cash payments, $40,000 here, $50,000 here. And then he turns to the contractors and he's like, hey, you know what? I have a lot of knowledge. So why don't you go ahead and hire me and pay me a yearly salary and I will, quote, consult you. Now, this trial was pretty interesting. See, he's not imprisoned yet. And he freely gave interviews while the jury was deliberating his fate. While enjoying a cappuccino, he told reporters that the witness's testimony was unfair and that he was just part of a broken system. Well, last week, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on 21 counts. Remember, I said 22? One of them was dismissed. Again, this guy isn't imprisoned and he will not be sentenced until January. But that doesn't mean the judge was not concerned about him being out, just doing his regular life. See, Costa, during the lead-up to the trial, had applied for a Greek passport. The judge asked Costa to explain his motive here, and Costa told the judge that he had recently obtained dual citizenship in Greece and had also secured the passport, so he's not hiding the ball. He said he had a good reason, though. Apparently, his father has left him a piece of property in Greece, and so he needed to obtain the paperwork to either keep or sell the inherited property. Ultimately, the judge decided to not imprison Costa immediately because he needs to help his attorney with some other federal charges that he is facing. And that federal trial is slated for February. Of course, he is also being sued in civil court. Now, when Costa is sentenced, he is expected to receive about 7 to 9 years, although the statutes say he could be sentenced to far more time. Costa is just one more example that crime is literally everywhere, in businesses, in homes, alleyways, and of course, forever prevalent in the government. Let me know in the comments what you think about this case. And now, back to the spooky, because I couldn't resist with it being Halloween and all. What are the spookiest of hotels to stay in this season? Well, here are some stories for you to round out the podcast this week and feel a little bit of a Halloween chill. Of course, it wouldn't be a perfectly collated list if we didn't include the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. The hotel, built in 1909 by steam car tycoon F.O. Stanley, of course you might know him better as the Stanley Steamer fame. Well, this was built as a TB retreat atop Rocky Mountain National Park. And this 140-room Georgian masterpiece inspired Stephen King's The Shining after his 1974 stay there. Okay, but really, who is the one haunting that place? Is it the twins down the creepy carpeted hotel hallway? Is it the old lady in the bathtub? Is it the blood gushing out of the elevator? And if none of those make sense to you, you've got to go back and watch the Hollywood movie The Shining. But no, apparently it's none of those things. Instead, it's the chambermaid that seems to haunt most people in the hotel. On June 25th, 1911, head chambermaid Elizabeth Lizzie Wilson lit a candle in room 217. She unknowingly ignited a gas leak. In one horrific explosion, the west wing of the hotel was blown apart, including the floor on which Lizzie was standing. She dropped through the floor to the dining room below, shattering her ankles. Now, she did survive the fall and the explosion, and she also was able to recover due to F.O. Stanley paying her extensive medical bills. And Lizzie, loyal to a fault, stayed on as an employee and worked until her death in 1950. Guests now say she will show up to tuck you in bed. Sometimes she rearranges your luggage, and lovers enjoying a romantic night have reported that Lizzie's ghost shoved the lovers apart in their beds. And the spooky was introduced to comedy back in 1994 when Jim Carrey, who was in Colorado filming Dumb and Dumber, well, he stayed in the Stanley Hotel for filming of exterior shots. Jim Carrey, then 32 years old and riding high off of Ace Ventura, specifically requested room 217. He wanted the whole experience because that's the hotel's most infamous suite due to chambermaid Lizzie. Apparently, Carrey said he was drawn to the room because Stephen King had stayed in that room in 1974 and had reported hearing phantom kids' laughter during his stay. And I guess that eerie night for Stephen King led to King dreaming up Jack Torrance's mental decline in The Shining. All right, it is reported that Jim Carrey checked in during late afternoon hours. He was kind of hyped for a thrill. In the evening, after about 3 hours in the room, Carrey was seen sprinting barefoot through the lobby in his pajamas, screaming for the front desk clerk. It is alleged he demanded a room swap immediately, refusing to return even for his luggage, his stuff that was in the room. In fact, he had the staff go fetch it. One witness, who was a night clerk, described him as, quote, white as a sheet, babbling about something in the room that wouldn't let him be. Allegedly, Jim Carrey crashed in a safer spot, possibly room 130. That is what is written in hotel logs, but, who knows? And it's reported that Jim Carrey has never spoke publicly about it. He's done no interviews, no late night show hits with comedy hosts. And according to U.S. Ghost Adventures, hotel staff say the story is totally legit and that it wasn't ginned up to increase tourism. Whether real or not, room 217 is reported to be booked out for months. My question is, would you stay there? And what about the next one on our list? The Congress Plaza Hotel in Chicago. That hotel opened in 1893 for the World's Fair. And geez, that's a topic we could do a multi-series podcast on, that World Fair. But alas, that's a different story. This massive hotel has hosted many presidents, many gangsters, and those two groups have more in common than we've ever wanted to admit. This hotel has seen over 20 documented deaths. Ghost City Tours gives a rundown of a few of those deaths. In 1939, Jewish refugee Adele Langer, who was fleeing the Nazis, she threw, hurled, shoved, I don't know how she did it, but her two sons, 6-year-old Carl and 4-year-old Jan, they went flying out of the 12th floor window. Adele then jumped herself. But it gets creepier. Carl's body never made it to the morgue. He has never been properly buried, and it is said he now stands at the end of the 12th floor hallway, mystically grinning at guests before, poof, disappearing. That's just 3 of the unexplained deaths. Another occurred in 1900, when on the night before his wedding, Captain Louis Ostheim, he was a Spanish-American war vet, he basically lost his mind. He shot himself while having a night terror. Reports say his shadow stalks various hotel hallways, and in particular, the dangerous rooftop. Staff has tried to follow him, but they say he always disappears once they get near him. And in 1904, an employee who was an elevator operator, he accidentally fell down the elevator shaft roughly 70 feet to his death. Of course, he is said to haunt the elevator at the Congress Plaza Hotel. And then in the 70s, a woman occupying room 441. She slit her own wrists and died. Guests have reported that their bathtub water will turn red and that sometimes a ghostly woman can be seen floating in that room. And like I said, we mentioned gangsters. It is said Al Capone used room 443, which is a luxury suite, to perform mob hits. All in all, if you're looking for a scary experience, the 12th floor seems to be your go-to, with noticeable cold spots, reports of soft whispers from nowhere, and then forces moving guests as they walk the hallways. Okay, so that was hotel number 2. Our third hotel is the Hotel del Coronado in California. See, on Thanksgiving Day, November 24th of 1892, Kate, she's a guest, she arrived at the opulent Hotel del Coronado, a fresh 1888 Victorian plaza buzzing with East Coast elites escaping winter. She signed the register as Lottie A. Bernard of Detroit, claiming she was a wealthy widow awaiting the arrival of her brother. Okay, that story's going to fall apart, so remember that part. She at first said she was a wealthy widow awaiting the arrival of her brother. When she checked into room 302, that room's now numbered 3327. So she checked into room 302. And for the first couple of days, she played the part of the role she had created upon check-in. She went on horseback rides on the beach. She had whiskey cocktails at the bar. She would chat with guests about her vast inheritance because she's a widow. But by day 3, her mask slipped. She started to become pale. She was vomiting. For a time, she was bedridden with a word that she kind of made up, neuralgia. That was what she called her pain. She spun tales to staff about her illness, saying she suffered from stomach cancer. Then she changed her story and claimed divorce papers were en route. So she's no longer a widow. And when feigning riches that were supposedly on the way, she had the need to borrow at least $1 from a clerk. So we went from a super rich widow to somebody who has no money and maybe money is on the way. Now, a maid tended to her, noting Kate's black dress was now stained with travel grime and her revolver was always laying near her. No visitors came and all of her telegrams went unanswered. And on November 28th, around midnight, amid a roaring storm, Kate staggered to the exterior stairs leading to the beach. She was found the next morning at 8:20 a.m. by hotel electrician Billy Barrow. She had a gunshot through the temple, her body twisted on the steps, the revolver lying nearby. And although the coroner ruled it was self-inflicted, reports show that the caliber of bullet in Kate's temple did not match the caliber that should have been shot by the revolver. Now, it took weeks for Kate to be identified, and she was buried in December of 1892. Her death? One of mystery lore. Was she shot by a card shark she had crossed paths with? Was she really the distraught soon-to-be divorcee who decided to end her life? Was she heartbroken and widowed and murdered by a mysterious man named Tom? Well, in the 1980s, San Francisco lawyer Alan Ney dug into the archives, pushing the homicide angle in his pamphlet, The Legend of Kate Morgan. In that pamphlet, he claims the mismatched bullet and Tom's shady past prove there was foul play in Kate's death. But the hotel's own published book says the, quote, beautiful stranger, that's the name they gave her, well, they said she was just truly a broken woman who ended her own life. Whatever the reason for her death, Kate is said to haunt room 3327. Remember, that's the new number for the room she stayed in. Ceiling fans will rotate and whir even when not hooked up to electricity. Guests have reported icy fingers touching their skin, specifically their cheeks, while they are sleeping. Some have said they can see her ghost smoking a cigarette in her lacy gown, looking out over the water. Again, is it just hype? And would you stay there? Let me know in the comments. Alright, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this spooky episode of Rise in Crime. Monday, we're going to get right back to regular crime stories. I have an update for you in the Arizona dad case. You know, the guy who left his child in the car for hours while he played video games? He's taken a plea deal. Also, I'm working on a story about doctors using their own genetics when a mother is struggling with infertility. That one's going to be an interesting one. And finally, I'm going to bring you an update to the gambling scandal in the NBA. Of course, I'll cover anything else that breaks over the weekend. I've got 3 quick notes about Monday's podcast. First, Margot on Spotify asked me to check my sources about the number of murders in Philly in 2024. The number I quoted, which was around 400, was an estimate based on year-over-year stats. I did not say it was that, so my correction. Actually, it was lower than that. The total number, once it was no longer being estimated, is somewhere around 270. The estimate was based on 2023 numbers, which those murder numbers were about 415. So yeah, Philly, congrats on lower numbers, but also we need to remember crime stats are being kept a little differently now, and that is also changing the numbers. But I am committed to giving you guys accurate info, so I'll correct or look deeper if I'm ever asked to. And by the way, the first sourced info that was just an estimate, well, it was from a major publication, a newspaper in the United States. So I do use very good sources, just sometimes they get it wrong too. It can be just, a mistake, and I will gladly correct it. Okay, so since we're talking about that Philly case, Emily on YouTube said she has had such strong feelings about Philly since Ellen Greenberg's case. So she has a hard time with the leadership of the city in general. We get you, Emily. Ellen's case is definitely some people's Roman Empire. And then to another story, most of you reacted to Jesse, that's our kid from Oklahoma, and his sentence of 78 years for SA being reduced to nearly nothing with the implementation of juvenile sentencing. Amber thinks he will escalate and reoffend. It is just a matter of time. And Adrian was baffled that Jesse doesn't have to register as an offender. Julie believes this case is a sure indication of corruption in the city government. And Nell pointed out that one therapy session a week isn't really rehab. All of those are valid points. Again, you guys, happy Halloween. Thank you for being here with me. I hope you guys have a great holiday. Thank you for sending in your case suggestions. Please share this episode or an episode that you especially love with a friend. And please do all of the appropriate things like follow, subscribe, leave comments, anything that will help this podcast grow. I truly appreciate it, especially those 5-star reviews. And the 3 podcasts here at Oh No Media are Murder with My Husband, Into the Dark, and Rise in Crime. Join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.